So I've got a bunch of different guitar picks here, and I sat down to record them to show you how different they can sound on your guitar and how much it can affect your guitar's tone, and I'll show you that in a minute. But while I was doing that, I decided to run a bit of an experiment to figure out why they sound different. What is it about a pick's design specifically that makes it sound so different from the next one? So after about an hour or so of testing the different picks and making some notes, I found that it was affecting my sound in 3 key ways. The first was the attack, which is that initial sound that you get when you pick or strum a string. The second was the output, which is the overall volume of the string as it rings out. And the third was the tone, which is the frequency response of the string, or how bright or dark sounding it was. And I found that all of these 3 things were affected differently by different parts of a pick's design. So the thickness, the profile, the tip material and size all played their own role in affecting the sound. So let's start by looking at the thickness. Some picks like this one are really bendy, and other ones hardly bend at all. And I found that this affected all 3 things, so the attack, the output, and the tone. The thicker picks had a louder output and a warmer tone, with more of those bass frequencies coming through, but it had a flatter attack, so that gave it a more mellow sound overall. Whereas the thinner picks had a lower output, but a much brighter sound, with plenty of that initial bite to them. Next up, I tested the profile, which is how beveled it is or how rounded it is on the side, and I found that this mostly affected the attack. It might have affected the tone a little bit, but there were times when I really couldn't tell the difference. I found that the flatter a pick was, the more attack it had, so more of that initial bite to it. Whereas the rounder profile has a much flatter attack because it's sliding off the string, which gives it a much smoother sound. And that's why you'll see this beveled design a lot on jazz picks. And this was the same for the pick's tip, but the tip also affected the tone. So a sharper tip like this one has a stronger attack, but also a much brighter tone to it. Whereas a pick with a flatter tip sounds a lot warmer and more mellow. Now onto the material. And along with thickness, I found that material had a really drastic impact on the sound. So I tested the most common materials that you'll find for guitar picks, like nylon, Delrin, which is also called Tortex, and celluloid. But there are other materials out there as well, like this Ultex pick that I'm using that sounds really cool. But you can also get fake bone, metal, and wood. For the sake of trying it, I also included a penny in my compilation at the end, trying to do the Brian May thing, but I didn't test it here because there's just too many variables. So I found that the material affects the tone the most, as well as the attack. Celluloid had the brightest tone and a really shiny, pingy sounding attack that I think sounds great with chords and would really sound good on an acoustic guitar. Ultex was quite similar in that it had that really bright sound and that really strong attack. Delrin was quite middle of the road in that it had a really balanced sound, but it still had that really strong attack to it. And finally, nylon was the most different of all of them in that it had a really warm sound, but a really flat attack. Interestingly, I picked up this pick thinking it was a normal Tortex Delrin pick, and while I was playing it didn't sound right to me, it sounded really warm. So after a quick Google search, it turns out it's actually a nylon blend. So it just goes to show that material really does play a big part in it. And finally, we've got the pick size, which is the general size and shape of a pick, not including the tip. And I couldn't really tell a difference when I tested them together. It initially changed how I held the pick, so this bigger one had a lot more of the tip showing, and that gave it a different sound compared to this one. But when I did a like-for-like test with the same amount of tip, I really couldn't tell the difference. Now, if you want to try these picks out for yourself, most of them are actually from the same variety pack. I've linked where you can find that in the description below. So I'll finish up this video with a compilation showing all the different picks playing together. But before I go, let me know your favorite guitar pick in the comments down below.